From a mighty meat-eater with the shortest arms you've ever seen to a hybrid duck dinosaur experts once thought was totally fake. These are some of the weirdest dinosaurs ever to walk the planet. You know this guy from Jurassic Park 3, but like pretty much all the dinosaurs in the Jurassic franchise, the real deal was a bit different. But the Spinosaurus was possibly one of the most dangerous dinosaurs to ever exist, and one of the strangest as well. In the past, Spinosaurus has come very close to slipping through our fingers. The 1944 bombing of Munich's Paleontological Museum obliterated the only known remains of the enigmatic dinosaur, at least the ones we knew about at the time. They had been discovered during expeditions in Egypt led by Bavarian paleontologist Ernst Stromer nearly 3 decades earlier.
Spinosaurus aegypticus.
Tragically, this left the paleontological world with Stromer's illustrations and notes as the only remaining traces of Spinosaurus. And for about 50 years or so, the sail-backed predator remained a mystery. This changed near the turn of the century when new specimens were discovered and described, providing scientists with additional information about the meat-eater. Clocking in at an estimated length of 49 feet, the Spinosaurus dwarfed even the ever-popular Tyrannosaurus rex. There's also ample evidence that it was semi-aquatic, the first dinosaur of its kind known to live in such a manner. There's also evidence that its powerful tail and toothy snout made it an efficient river hunter. Researchers at the University of Portsmouth called the creature an enormous river monster. Despite that description, the reason for its enormous sail remains a mystery though, with guesses about its function ranging from attracting mates to regulating body temperature to somehow corralling its prey. Having a name that literally translates to meat-eating bull sent some lofty expectations, but the team behind Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom did a killer job bringing the Carnotaurus to life. Its distinctly demonic skull gives a Carnotaurus an impressive profile, particularly the 2 brow horns located right above its eyes. But its oddly proportioned arms somehow managed to look even more ridiculous than the famously tiny forelimbs of the T-Rex. In fact, some experts believe that the freakishly small hands and lower forelimbs of Carnotaurus may have been completely useless for helping the meat-eating dinosaur catch its victims. A study published in the journal Paleontology compared the arms of Carnotaurus to those of other tiny-limbed bipedal carnivorous dinosaurs. Interestingly, while the researchers were able to identify certain characteristics in its arms that could distinguish Carnotaurus from its relatives, they weren't able to figure out why the fearsome predator had such tiny mitts. That said, despite Carnotaurus's hilariously small limbs, its Cretaceous-era prey probably still had plenty of reason to be afraid of it. In a study from the University of Alberta, experts found that Carnotaurus appears to have been built for short-burst sprinting, particularly because of its strong leg and tail muscles. Coupled with its iconic horns that made it truly look like a dinosaur from hell, it may actually have been a raging carnivorous bull in its heyday. A cursory glance at the enormous claws of Therizinosaurus would probably make anyone unfamiliar with the dinosaur think that it's a fearsome predator, and the Hollywood version of it looked freaky in Jurassic World Dominion stalking Claire in the forest. However, paleontologists would be quick to disagree about how predatory it really was. Their analysis of its fossilized remains actually suggests that it used its massive claws for gathering food from tall vegetation and defending itself from meat-eaters. The fact that there are few legally obtained Therizinosaurus remains for experts to examine has prompted them to theorize about the dinosaur's existence. Most theories are based on what experts determine to be its related species. Even with incomplete info, it's likely that Therizinosaurus had the longest claws of any animal that ever lived. That said, this dinosaur is no stranger to paleontological extrapolation. When Russian paleontologist Yevgeny Malayev had to describe this peculiar dinosaur in a 1954 paper, he had only partial remains of the animal's huge claw bones to work with. He assumed that the bones belonged to a giant turtle-like reptile, so its species name translates to turtle-like, while the genus name comes from the Greek word for reaping or mowing. Perfect, considering its 3-foot-long claws. The Cretaceous period certainly gave the world some very odd-looking dinosaurs, and the Stegouros was no exception. In fact, it gave scientists enough reason to come up with an entirely new dinosaur subgroup for it. First described in a 2021 paper in Nature, Stegouros lived approximately 74 million years ago in prehistoric Chile. Scientists named it after the Greek words for roof and tail, in reference to its tail weapon. While Stegouros may have looked a lot like other armored dinosaurs, its unique tail made it stand out. Unlike the typical club-like formations in most ankylosaur tails, Stegouros sported a flat tail weapon with 7 pairs of bony projections surrounding it. In addition, the researchers noted that Stegouros turned out to be close with 2 other unique ankylosaur species. According to the authors, the similarities in the dinosaur's tail structures were enough evidence to suggest that they may have evolved from an ancestor that took a different turn on the evolutionary tree. This prompted them to propose an entirely new subgroup of ankylosaurs. Humans rely so much on their ability to grasp and hold things with their hands and fingers. It may be hard to imagine how other species survive, let alone thrive, without such a useful trait. Enter Linhenykus, a dinosaur that lived over 70 million years ago in what is now Mongolia. The small creature's species name, Monodactylus, or single finger, is a reference to what makes it unique among all the dinosaurs. To date, it is the only non-avian dinosaur known to have just one digit on each of its forelimbs. Linhenykus likely only grew to be the size and weight of today's big parrots. While it's unclear to paleontologists exactly why Linhenykus didn't have the two tiny outer digits that the other small dinosaurs related to it possessed, it's possible that the single-finger meat-eater's strange hands were effective tools for hunting insects, as the dinosaur could have used its pick-like digits to dig into nests. In their 2011 paper published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, it suggested the species may have lacked fingers simply because it didn't need them. The Concavenator was far from being the largest, longest, or most dangerous dinosaur among its Cretaceous cohorts. However, when it was found in Spain in 2010, paleontologists took note of two peculiar characteristics that clearly distinguished it from other meat-eating dinosaurs of similar size. The bumps on its forearm, which strongly suggest quill knobs or protofeathers, and its ridiculously tall 11th and 12th vertebrae, which made it look like it had two crests jutting out of its back. Experts are divided on whether or not the Concavenator had quills or feathers. Subsequent research proposed that the quill knobs may have actually been intermuscular lines functioning as tendon attachments. And scientists are still in the dark about the real purpose of the carnivore's mysterious hump. Would it have been a body temperature regulator or simply a way to attract potential mates? Paleobiologist Michael Benton perhaps put it best in Nature magazine. We can't say anything about it other than, isn't it weird? Kosmoceratops, Greek for ornamented horned-faced, may have had the most number of horns of any dinosaur ever discovered. Like many of its iconic relatives, Kosmoceratops had a horn right above each eye, as well as one jutting out of the end of its nose. But it also had a horn on each cheek, 10 spikes decorating the top of its massive, nearly 6-foot-long skull, and a bunch of spikes adorning the sides of its frill. This dinosaur existed in the latter part of the Cretaceous period and likely measured an astonishing 15 feet from end to end. The creature's specific name, Richardsoni, recognizes its discoverer, geological engineer and accidental paleontologist Scott Richardson. Among all of the ceratopsian dinosaurs discovered within this century, Kosmoceratops stood out because of its elaborate skull ornamentation, even though scientists aren't completely sure about the purpose it served. Scott Sampson, the lead author of the study in which Kosmoceratops was described, says that it wouldn't have made much sense for the dinosaur to use its head ornaments as offensive or defensive weapons. The arrangement was too peculiar. Rather, it's more likely that the horns and frills were mainly for display, either to attract mates or scare off rivals. When Polish paleontologist Zofia Kejla-Jaworowska unearthed the first known remains of Deinocheirus in 1965, she wasn't really sure what she was looking at. It was a small assortment of bones, which included two humongous three-clawed forelimbs that measured about 7.9 feet long. 5 years later, researchers gave it a name, Deinocheirus mirevicus, which basically means terrible hand. For more than 4 decades, those were the only documented traces of Deinocheirus, which gave experts a particularly hard time making heads or tails out of the terrible-handed dinosaur. This changed when 2 new specimens were unearthed in 2006 and 2009, giving paleontologists a clearer idea of what Deinocheirus was like when it was alive. Estimates have pegged it to be about 36 feet in length and approximately 6.5 tons in weight. Along with thick bony spines along its back, it also had a tail that could have supported feathers. It was the largest among the ostrich-like dinosaurs, described by paleontologist Stephen Brusatte as a colossal, slow-moving, horse-headed, hump-backed dinosaur that looks like something out of a bad sci-fi movie. He also concluded that Deinocheirus likely ate pretty much anything it could grab with its gigantic mitts. Part raptor, part duck, and part penguin, the curious-looking Halszkaraptor was such an absurd sight that the paleontologist who initially looked at it nearly dismissed it as a fraud. Discovered in southern Mongolia's Jadakta Formation, an area that scientists believe was part of a rich, thriving ecosystem during the late Cretaceous period, Halszkaraptor's first known remains were poached and illegally transported out of the country. They eventually ended up in the possession of paleontologist Francois Esquier. Curious about the creature's authenticity, Esquier sent it to Pascal Godefroy, whose team also thought it was too bizarre to be real, thanks to its paddle-like arms and plus-foot claws. Upon closer inspection, though, they found more of the dinosaur's bones in the orange limestone where it was encased, including a long neck and a snout reminiscent of a duck's.
Life, finds a way.
Halszkaraptor's characteristics suggest that it could have been amphibious and may have primarily fed on fish. Incisivosaurus can perhaps be likened to a turkey with a parrot-like head and rabbit's teeth. Take some time to let that sink in. Unearthed in China's Ishian Formation, a remarkably rich and well-preserved fossil bed dating back to the early Cretaceous period, Incisivosaurus goettieri shared many traits with other theropods, often carnivorous three-toed hollow-boned dinosaurs. Its name is an homage to both its teeth and paleontologist Jacques Gaultier. Fossils later identified as Incisivosaurus give credence to the idea that it was covered with feathers. Due to its teeth and marks of wear and tear similar to those found in herbivorous dinosaurs, scientists concluded that Incisivosaurus was likely a plant eater, or was at least omnivorous. Meanwhile, a 2022 paper published in Scientific Reports suggests that Incisivosaurus had a remarkably powerful bite, compared to the related species that were over 30 times more massive. The idea that birds sprang forth from dinosaurs has become more popular and widely accepted in recent years, especially with the increasing amount of evidence directly linking the animal groups on the evolutionary tree.
And look at the half-moon-shaped bones on the wrists. No wonder these guys learn how to fly.
Take Epidexipteryx, for example. This flightless dinosaur from Inner Mongolia is said to have lived over 150 million years ago. The fact that it sported a fluffy, down-like covering along with 4 enormous ribbon-like tail feathers has made scientists confident enough to designate it as the oldest known species to have these unusual traits. Interestingly, Epidexipteryx hui, or display wing for us non-scientists, lacks the contour feathers found on the limbs of today's birds. Dr. Graham Taylor, Oxford University's Animal Flight Group chief, told BBC News that the dinosaur's decorative feathers likely serve as proof that the ancestors of today's birds were used in show even before they were used in flight. Any list of strange dinosaurs has to include the Ubirajara. Just look at it. Reconstructions based on its fossilized remains make it look like it took a couple of arrows to both of its shoulders. Interestingly, its bizarre shoulder feathers aren't the only newsworthy thing about this dinosaur, as even the path toward its discovery and description is mired in controversy. When Ubirajara was publicly unveiled in a 2020 paper published in Cretaceous Research, it received a fair amount of attention. The authors analyzed a 120 million-year-old fossil from a German museum that had acquired 25 years earlier. The prehistoric remains, which were discovered in northeastern Brazil's limestone deposits, reveal a dinosaur estimated to have been 4.5 feet long and over a foot tall in life. What truly sets Ubirajara apart from other dinosaurs of comparable size are its spear-like shoulder feathers, which scientists speculate could have helped increase its odds of finding a suitable mate. Ubirajara means Lord of the Spear in the language of the indigenous people in the area in which it was discovered. Unfortunately, the scientific community latched on to that discovery for another reason. Obtaining fossils through less than legitimate means has been a long-standing issue in the paleontological world, and it seems like Ubirajara had the same problem. Brazil's laws do not permit any sort of fossil exportation, which raised doubts that the German museum may have smuggled Ubirajara out of Brazil. The study's authors have since withdrawn their paper, and the dinosaur's name is now considered scientifically invalid and informal.